Hi everyone, welcome back to the Space Koala channel and welcome to the Processing with the Space Koala, which may or may not become a series depending on how today goes. My plan here is just to process an astrophoto the way I would normally, but also I kind of explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Also showing trial and error or what kind of issues I potentially encounter and how I attempt to fix them from the beginning to the end. So let's get into it. The very first target is the Giraffe Nebula. I believe the catalog number is LBN 603. It is found in the constellation of Cassiopeia, and it is a faint dark nebula in a section of the sky where there's a lot of dust all around, and it's just a beautiful region, but it requires a lot of exposure time and dark skies. I did not shoot this from home. I shot it from a place around 45 minutes from my house, which is not a proper dark sky area. It is about a board of 4, and I collected a lot of data. For this image, I used my Celestron RASA 8 telescope paired with my ZWO ASI 2600MC Duo on a ZWO AM3 harmonic mount. Let's get started. The only thing I have already done in preparation for today was the actual stacking part. It took almost 17 hours. This was both because I had a lot of data and also because I did kind of an experiment that I'll show you in a second, but I just saved this window here just to show you. However, you can see that I had 786 shots of 300 seconds each. So that's 65.5 hours. This was taken with a color camera. However, it is a lot of data, so I expected I should get some good signal. And I saw that with the exception of one, all of them were used. Now, if I just close this, then you can see the settings that I used in PixInsight for WBPP. Here I just loaded everything. And the reason that it took so long was not just because I used local normalization, but because in the channels configuration, I decided for the first time ever to try combined plus separate. So what this does is it doesn't just stack an RGB image for you, but it does the individual stacks of the 3 channels. If I run the diagnostics, you see that it is requiring almost 1 terabyte. Now I didn't have that amount of free space on my computer, or I was very close to the limit. So I actually use an external SSD for processing. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll just link it below. This is a very fast SSD that supports Thunderbolt 4, and of course you also need a short Thunderbolt 4 cable just to make it quick, and it works very well, and I like to process like this. So then I ran that. It took 17 hours. I can show you the files that I got, original files, the flats and the light, and then we have the calibrated, the bayered and registered images, and finally the master files. Let me just show you one single image just to see what we're working with, like something from the middle of the night. This is kind of the signal that we're working with on a single image. Obviously it's very noisy, but that's fine. This is already registered. And then if I open the processed images, for the RGB image, I did a one-time drizzle because it should be better for the colors compared to just regular stacking. I will just check the RGB image first. I mean, the signal is definitely there, but I was kind of expecting a nicer outcome when I composed this star in here. I might end up kind of cropping this here. I think that's what I will do. And then if I check the individual channels, I have no noise whatsoever in the red. Then green is twice as much data, so I absolutely expect no noise. And the blue, which might be slightly worse, but this is nice. I will leave these here, but for simplicity, first I will just attempt to see if I can get a nice picture using the color image. I'll rename it RGB. I'm trying to remember what was the original concept in terms of the composition. First, I need to mirror this because RASA mirrors images. So I do that via geometry. I will do a vertical mirror. Yes, and then you have the giraffe here. I think this is the head, and it's like running or jumping. And I think I might just crop somewhere here, but I can decide that later. I have some stars that are burned in, but not too many. So the situation is not too bad considering the f2 system and the 5-minute exposures that I did. First things first, I will do another plate solve because I just mirrored it, so it lost the world coordinate system. Then I will do the deconvolution because if I can get the stars a little smaller, I will see better. I will take a small preview. I will open Blur Exterminator. I will reset this to the default values. I will do a live preview, which I like to set to the maximum resolution. First, I will go crazy with the stars because I just want to get them out of the way so I can see the nebulosity better, but I will reset that afterwards. So I'm focusing on the nebula now. I believe I will do no sharpening. I will sharpen the stars a little bit. Yes, this is what I will do. That is done. At this stage, if I needed it, I would do noise reduction. I don't believe there's any noise whatsoever in this picture, so I will remove the stars, but not because I will keep them off. I will just remove them so I can see the background better and evaluate if I need any type of background extraction. I just use Star Exterminator for that. And this gives us a better idea of what we're working with. This helps me see that I have a single large gradient going from the top right corner where it's more like brownish greenish to the lower left corner where it's like purple. I will put the stars back on. First, before doing any kind of background extraction, I will do the color calibration because who knows, it might help a little bit with the background. Of course, I use Spectrophotometry color calibration. The preset here is made for my mono camera, so I will just change this to Sony color sensor with the IR cut. And from the ideal QE curve, we need to deviate because I'm using a Sony IMX571, and I will just apply that. I don't like what I'm seeing. I mean, the points are along the axis, but it's way too few. I think that is because I'm filtering the stars too much, so I will go back and try to force more stars to be included by just increasing the saturation threshold. Boy, the saturation threshold was increased. I will stretch it again this time. I can switch back to the linked stretch. I will remove the stars once again, just to evaluate the situation. What has changed is before the gradient went, I think, more in this diagonal direction, and now it's a clear right to left. Now, if I have such a clear gradient, I will try to choose the simplest gradient correction I can think of, and that would be the automatic background extraction. Now, if you're using the new-ish tool gradient correction, it gives you the option to do that first, but I just want to have a look at what it does. So the simplest way to remove a gradient like this is to choose automatic background extraction and change the function degree to 1. So the degree of the function just tells you the complexity of kind of the shape of the gradient that it comes up with, and a function degree of 1 is just linear, so it would just be a line, which means it will be just a single gradient. And I will also not discount the background model because I want to see if it's getting out exactly the thing that I want. Yes, this is what I wanted to get out. So let me just see the resulting image. It is not good enough yet. So this is not enough in this case. Sometimes it is, but I can still see some remaining gradients. So I will be using the gradient correction tool. I will go back here and I will be using gradient correction. I start out with the default parameters. I will create a preview of my entire image, and I will start out with a simplified model of a degree 1. I do not have to generate that. I will start out with the default models and see what comes out. This is the after. This is the before. But that is already a billion times better. If I remove the stars from the background corrected preview, that is a lot better, but it is not perfect. There is something remaining in the lower left corner. You see I'm removing the stars like a billion times, but then I put them back on. I just use that tool to see my nebulas better, which tells me that a single round is not enough. However, I think everything else is being done correctly. So what I will do is I will enable automatic convergence, and that will just keep applying it until it kind of disappears. And I will also choose the generation of the gradient model so I see what it's removing. That is done. I'm not convinced about this. Like, for sure this part is correct and this part is correct, but I'm not convinced about that black or like dark thing. You know what, I'm just gonna save a starless version somewhere here for reference. There might be something to it. It's hard to tell if that is a real gradient or it is just a result of less of this brighter. It's funny to call it bright because obviously this is very dark, but it's still like dust that is illuminated. Anyway, I will just save it here. But in any case, what I don't like about it is like, seems a little harsh. So I think I can make it a bit smoother. The new gradient model, it is a bit smoother, like in this region, this is the new one at the top and this is the old one at the bottom. Yeah, I kind of prefer that. This is the corrected image. I feel like that is as good as it's going to get. There are still some color issues. I think I see a tiny bit of purple here, and then there's some green around the large bright stars that just had like halos. I will do another trial where if I remove, so this is the original image, I will remove the stars first. I will decrease the low tolerance a bit to see if it will be a bit more critical with these areas at the end. That is better. That is better, and this is gonna be my settings. So I close this because now I have the correct settings, and I will just apply it on my original image. So we are happy with the background. We should be happy with the stars, but with any sort of gradient correction or background extraction, any manipulation like that, there is a risk that the colors get a bit screwed up. So I will just run SPCC again. Actually, I would just get the same settings from my history. I will just run this again. Okay. This will be the starting point. I can close that. And now everything that had to be done kind of in the linear phase has been done. Now is the time to stretch. Now, I am not a fancy person when it comes to stretching images. 9 times out of 10, I use some sort of the auto stretch functionality in PixInsight. Now, what changes here is what I do with the stars. Depending on kind of the field of view that I have and the number of stars as a result, I may stretch the stars separately or together. And therefore, I will try it both ways because I cannot know ahead of time what will come out better. What I know here is that I have to reduce the stars quite a bit in order to see the nebula better, and also because I want to stretch the nebula much more than I want to stretch the stars. So I will create a copy of this just to leave it there for later if I need to stretch the stars separately. But what I'm gonna do the first time is the simplest stretch of all. That will be the histogram transformation of PixInsight. And I'm just trying to understand how much of these stars are completely burned in. I mean, they are, but that is not something that I will be able to fix because many of them were already kind of saturated before. Now is the time that I definitely want to separate the stars for processing. This time I will be using the large overlap and generate the star image. And then I will see if I'm able to use that image or I need to stretch one separately. I put the stars aside so that I can work on the nebula. The giraffe is so cute. I just wish it was kind of running more forward than up. Oh, and there are some nice... Where was the galaxy? Here. This is spiral galaxy. That is unknown. I don't know what that is. This is a nice spiral galaxy. You can see the structure. That is a galaxy. This is a spiral galaxy also. And now it's time to make the nebula shine. I kind of already have to decide on the final composition because I have to keep that in mind when I'm just like working on the dynamic range of the image. And while it is quite a shame to kind of remove all this nebulosity, I think I will end up having to do that. In any case, I will have a look at my curves. I don't have very good eyes when it comes to colors, so what I like to do is just in the preview, I up the saturation by a lot to see if there's any remaining cast of any sort, but I don't. There is a little bit of green remaining in the nebula areas because these blue parts, I'm not going to touch those because that is kind of normal because that just comes from those bright stars that we had before. However, I'm not so convinced by the green, so I will use this view and do a tiny bit of SCNR. I want to say like, I'll start with 25. That is not bad. Let's see, about like 40. I even think that might be too much. I will go back to 30. I'm going to try 35. That's the one. I think this is the one I'm going to go with. So we did an SCNR of 0.35. Now if I get this back to normal, obviously that looks much nicer and I can start adding some contrast to the image. I think I will first stretch this a little bit further as a starting point because I want my dust areas to kind of shine. And then I will start adding contrast using an S curve. That is looking better, but before applying it, I also don't want to burn in like the galaxies completely. I am running a risk of that in the brightest of areas, but maybe they're not entirely burned in. Before applying it, I will also do a little bit of saturation and the S curve that I've created. I will be adding more contrast later, but I want to see what I'm dealing with. I see a little bit of noise now that I didn't see before, especially some color noise. It is really only this color noise that is a bit disturbing. I will try to see what I can do with ACDNR. I will not be applying the lightness noise reduction, but maybe some chrominance noise reduction. I will do a preview. Wow, that's very big. That is making the color noise much better. Yeah, I think I have to apply a little bit of the lightness noise as well. This makes me think that I should have done some noise reduction in the beginning, even though I was not able to see the noise, because I think it would have worked better if I'd done that. No, I will not be doing this. So what I will do is I will go back to the linear phase and I will just apply a bit of noise reduction on the original image. So I will take all my steps, I will put them in a process container, and what I need to do is go back to here. Alright, so here we're still in the linear phase and I can have a look at this part. If I overstretch it, you can kind of see the noise, but you can't see it as well as I could see it on the starless stretched image, but I will just apply a little bit of noise exterminator 0.6, maybe a bit less, 0.5, because I don't want to make it like artificially too smooth. 0.55. I think this is the sweet spot. I will apply this on my image, and then I will go back and do all of my other steps. Histogram transformation, then star exterminator. I will do the SCNR, was done, and I will apply the curves transformation twice. Okay, this is my new image. That is looking a lot better, but I don't believe that it looks exaggerated in terms of noise reduction. So it still looks kind of okay. And what is that? That is like some weird object in the background. This part of the image really bothers me. I just want to crop it off, but I will wait until the end. In terms of the stars, obviously they are like super large, but I want to see if I can use the stretch stars or I end up having to stretch the stars separately. First, I'm going to have a look at the color situation here. There is some green and a tiny bit of magenta, but I mean, we're really exaggerating here, so it's not bad at all, but I will be using just the tiniest amount of SCNR. I'm not even convinced that it's needed. I will not touch the star colors for now. What I have to figure out, however, is how I'm going to make these stars smaller, and this will be difficult. I will put them on a copy of the image using this script. So the way I like to combine stars with the starless images is using this script, using the screen operation, because I mean I'm saying this is how I like to do it. This is how you should do it if the way that you had to remove the stars was with the unscreen, because this is the opposite operation of that. I will put that in here, and I will put that on the clone of my image. And I recently started using the star reduction script of Bill Blanchard. And so I will say that I have my starless view, and then I have the target view. And you have the option of protecting small stars. So I will focus on a small area of the sky. So the protection of the small stars is all these tiny ones here. You don't want to reduce them because they would just disappear. So I will initialize that, which automatically enables the small star protection. And so we are only reducing these medium stars. Now, I don't know if I want to reduce also something smaller than that. I like to use the star method, because if you do that, then the stars kind of also naturally increase in their saturation. And this is just really a trial and error for me. Okay, I don't like it. I want to get fewer stars. I will disable the small star protection, because in any case, they haven't disappeared. So it's not bad at all. I mean, I will just apply this just to get the image, and then later I can compare it with another image if I also try to stretch the stars separately. So I will call them stars reduced. I can close the clone, it's not needed. I'm just going to do a couple of different versions and compare what they look like. So I'm duplicating this view a few times, and this one will be with stars reduced. This doesn't convince me. I think I will have to try an attempt to stretch the stars separately. For that, I need to separate the stars still in the linear phase. So what I will do is I will call this image linear. Then I will exterminate those stars, and therefore I have an image called linear stars. I recently downloaded the script library of SETI Astro, and he has a star stretch. I have variable success with it. Some images work really well, some images I don't like. So I will just try to see how it performs here. I have to do it on the unstretched star image only. I will be creating a preview, thank you. I will do it in a 1-to-1. I wish there was like an even more magnified view of the stars. I feel like I wanted to remove green noise as well, because I do see some green on the brighter small stars. Now this is the extreme, and then you have the 0 stretch. So I will go for like something just below the default, which is 4. But I feel like they're still getting a bit burned in. I can try to boost the colors. Let's go all the way and see what happens. I will see what comes out of it. The stars look so, I don't know, compared to the ones that I reduced, if I compare a small section of it. So the difference is all these like kind of diffraction spike things around the stars are much more pronounced in the one that was first auto stretched and then reduced versus this one. I feel like this one has nicer colors, but that's not really an issue because I think that here we already stretched the colors and in the other one we didn't. I will do a version of the starry image also with these. I will call it with linear stars. And so I can compare the two images. Right, so the difference is evident. Somehow even the background looks better on this one. I still have to do something about that. I thought that I had removed everything that was in the background, but it's still there. In any case, I think this will be the star image that I will go with. But they look very fake. Because like the reason they look fake is even the tiniest ones are like saturated, not in terms of color, but in terms of brightness. Probably, I don't know. Now, having boosted the saturation, let me just check something. I will just saturate the life out of this. I just want to see if there is a bit of there is a tiny bit of magenta. So well, of course I will not leave the saturation level, but I will invert it and use a bit of SCNR. So if you invert an image, then anything that is green becomes magenta, and anything that is magenta becomes green. So the colors go to their like complementary colors, I don't know, the opposite. And therefore, if you invert the image and then remove the green, then you're removing the magenta on the original image. In fact, there is a script called reduce magenta stars, correct magenta stars, I don't know. Yes, all it does is the same thing. So I will remove the green and I will go back here. And now, okay, I mean, you're always going to get a little bit of that left, but I think that's just part of it. Because now, if I do something crazy like this, like super saturated everything, you don't see either an overwhelming green color or an overwhelming magenta color, and that's what I want, because then I know that I don't have any more like cast of anything. But of course I don't want to make it look like this. I mean, the stars should have some color, but not like that. So I will try to see what it looks like right now. That is better. However, I don't know if it's my eyes, but now I see a little bit of a green cast over the entire image. I will try to work on that a little bit. So once again, I will go crazy with the saturation. There is a little bit of green here, and I think that I will just touch the balance here a tiny bit. It's not even green. It is green. And if I just increase this ever so slightly, yes, it is better. So I will be applying the, it doesn't even look like I did anything, but I did because these are values. So I will apply this. Oh, it's a bit of a magenta, or blue rather. Here, this part is a bit bluish, which means if I push the blue in the direction of yellow, And what I'm trying to get at is anywhere where I see a little bit of like a bluish hue, I want to get to like gray. I would like to think that this is helping a little bit. So I will apply that, but of course not the crazy saturation. So before, after, yes. I will apply that. I think I could use a little bit more contrast on the entire image, but in particular in these areas of the giraffe. Let me just focus on this area because we have the entire dynamic range here. So I want these areas to get darker here, and then these very bright areas could even get lighter, and their point is that they're still sitting here and not in the high range. So they could go quite a bit higher, and these can just remain where they were before. Yeah, I like that because the giraffe is almost like jumping off the page. I like that. Let me see that on the entire image. It will not be the entire image. I will 100% crop it. The whole thing is a bit blue. I don't know if it could do a little bit of warmth. A small amount once again. I'm going to create a luminance mask because I'm only trying to get like the warmer areas, like the brighter areas a bit warmer. So just to show you what this is doing, this is all mostly applying the changes on the brighter areas, but I only want to do a tiny bit of warmth. And I feel like the more I do, the more green it gets. So I will do it at the same time as a bit of green removal. So this is the before and after. It's a bit too much red. Before, after. So less warmth kind of thing here. Okay. I'm liking this image. Let's have a look at what it looks like with this. So you want to make sure you're removing the mask before you put the stars back on, because I see pictures online where people forget to do that, and you see a picture of Andromeda where there are no stars in front of Andromeda. This giraffe is looking healthy, but yeah, I think that this image is about 90% done. I have to decide on the final composition, which will not be easy considering this thing here, because I wouldn't even mind like having the subject a bit offset, but like this thing with the giant star doesn't convince me because it's just drawing all your attention away. I don't know if it could do with even more contrast. I'm going to try. I don't have any masks on, because all the dark areas are like still here. Like there is room to go down here on the shadows, and in turn I can make the highlights that much brighter. I think this is looking as good as it will be probably. I will do my final steps in Pixelmator Pro because I have Photoshop. I have to look at it from a distance, but I don't dislike it. It's a nice image, but I will have to come up with a composition, and that's fine because the image is large enough that I can try cropping it a little bit. It's just such a shame for this area here, but it just creates such an imbalanced composition if I leave that in there. My concern here is that because of this bright star, it kind of attracts your eye, and then it makes you wonder what is off the image. So I don't know if I can exclude that star somehow. I will. This is what I will do. Because if you see what I mean, if I were to do this image, then your eyes are automatically drawn to the remaining like bright areas. So that's not a good idea because I want people to focus on the giraffe. I like this part so much, I might just make it into a different image, but for the giraffe, it must go. I like this composition because you have the diagonal that is created by this thing of dust. I don't know if it's still too distracting here, but then you have the other diagonal, so it kind of makes almost like an X. And then you have the giraffe a bit offset from the center. This is one option. Or I can try something vertical, which is also not bad. It's just such a shame for like 75% of the image to be thrown away. Yeah, this image is too small if I crop it off. I'm gonna do this one with the diagonal, maybe a bit larger. I think I just have to say goodbye to the idea of the giraffe looking up, because if it's just that is limiting me. Because this part is also nice. Just have to get rid of that star. So I will definitely have this version of the image because it's just a nice composition, but of course I am keeping the original, and I might just also try some other compositions. I don't know. I will think about it. In any case, that was my processing. I don't want to say tutorial because it's more like me showing the struggles and the difficulties that I go through and all the uncertainty that I have, which you obviously cannot see if you just look at a ready image because it just looks ready. I hope that it was somewhat useful to some of you. I'm happy with how the image turned out. I will also be publishing this now on my social media and on Astrobin, so if you go in there, you're able to look at it like full screen size. I will also upload the entire uncropped image to Astrobin if you want to have a look at all the data, because obviously this is a much smaller image. Let me know if you found this useful, and if people like it, I will be doing more of this. I have to come up with a name because this is very far from a tutorial. This is struggling with the space koala. I also thought about doing these live so that maybe people can comment or suggest things or ask questions, but it would be so long. In any case, if there is interest, let me know, and maybe also I will change the format later on. But in the meantime, I do hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you like the photo that came out of it. I do, because I like all animal nebulas. So the giraffe was on the bucket list, and I wish you clear skies until next time.